52 assassins stepped out of the shadows. Perfect formation, synchronized, professional. Sung-jae reached for his weapon. Camille grabbed his wrist. "Get behind me." He stared at her. "There are 50 of them." 52, she smiled. "I taught 43 of them everything they know." The lead assassin removed his mask. "Agent 43, orders are to bring you back alive." She didn't move. "And if I refuse?" "Then we complete the secondary objective." He looked at Sung-jae. "Eliminate the target." Camille's smile widened. "You always were bad at math, Chen. If you trained under me, what makes you think you can beat me?" "We have numbers. I have anger, and 3 years of knowing this day would come." She stepped forward. "So let's see if 43 students can take out their teacher." 52 against 2. Those aren't survival odds. But sometimes the numbers don't tell the whole story. Let's find out what does.
The champagne glass hit the floor before anyone heard the shot. KO Sung-jae watched it fall. Crystal spinning in overhead light, liquid suspended midair for half a second, then impact, sharp crack against marble that made 3 men at the table flinch. But not the fourth. The fourth man didn't move at all anymore. He'd been leaning back in his chair, laughing at something Park had said about property values in Gangnam. Now he was just leaning. The laughter was still on his face. Park's hand was still raised mid-gesture. And Sung-jae understood something in the space between the glass breaking and the silence that followed. The shot hadn't come from outside the room. "Nobody move." The voice came from near the door. Calm. Almost apologetic. "This isn't about any of you." Sung-jae didn't turn to look. He was watching Park's face instead, watching the way shock was giving ground to something else. Recognition, maybe. Or confirmation. Park's eyes went to the fallen man, then to Sung-jae, then away too quickly. That's when Sung-jae knew. The meeting had been in a private room 3 floors below street level in Itaewon. Neutral ground. Steel door, no windows, security outside who'd checked everyone twice. The kind of place where men who didn't trust each other could still do business because the architecture did the trusting for them. Sung-jae had chosen it himself. Someone had chosen better. Park. Sung-jae kept his voice level. "When did they get to you?" Park's hand was trembling now. Not fear. Calculation. The kind of tremor that comes from adding numbers in your head while your body's trying to catch up. It's not, "Look, they made it clear I didn't have options." Everyone has options. Sung-jae picked up his own glass. Still half full. He took a drink. The man near the door shifted slightly, barely perceptible, but Sung-jae caught it in his peripheral vision. Anticipating. Ready to fire again if the movement meant something it didn't. The question is whether you understand what they cost before you pay them. The door opened. She came in the way pressure changes before rain. No announcement, just a shift in the room's weight. Sung-jae had seen her twice before. Once in Busan at a dock warehouse where 3 men with knives had learned that reach doesn't matter as much as timing. Once in his own office, standing perfectly still while he pretended to review a contract and actually studied the way she breathed. Slow. Controlled. Like someone who'd learned to ration air. Camille Ashford didn't look at the body. She looked at the man near the door instead. "You're standing wrong," she said. The man's eyes narrowed. "Excuse me?" "Your stance. Weight on your front foot, shoulders squared to the room. You think you're projecting control." She moved 3 steps closer. Just 3. "You're actually limiting your range of motion. If anyone came through that door behind you right now, you'd have to pivot before you could fire. That's 0.8 seconds you don't have." The man's grip on his weapon tightened. "Also," Camille continued, "you killed the wrong person." Park made a sound, something between a gasp and a laugh that died before it finished. The man near the door didn't respond. He was recalculating. Sung-jae could see it in the micro-adjustments of his posture, the way his eyes flicked to Park and then back to Camille. Professional training, Sung-jae thought. Military background, probably. But military training has a weakness built into it. It assumes the chain of command holds. Take that away, introduce doubt about who's actually running the operation, and the whole structure starts to fracture. Camille took another step. "The contract specified KO Sung-jae," she said. "That's him. The man you shot was Choi Min-ho. He owns 4 restaurants in Myeongdong and has a gambling problem. Whoever hired you didn't care enough to send a photograph." The man's jaw worked. "I have my orders." "Sure you do." Camille's hand stayed loose at her sides. Visible. Non-threatening. Question is whether the person who gave you those orders is still planning to pay you, or if they just needed you to create chaos while they repositioned their actual assets. Sung-jae watched Park's face go pale. This wasn't, Park started. Shut up. The man near the door swung his weapon toward Park. You told me third seat from the left. I know, Sung-jae always sits. Park changes the seating arrangement last minute. Camille's voice was quieter now. Almost gentle. Probably got a call an hour before the meeting. Someone told him Sung-jae would definitely be in that specific seat, just needed confirmation. And Park, being Park, didn't ask why they needed confirmation of something they supposedly already knew. The room went very still. Park's tremor had spread to his whole body now. They said they'd cover my debt. 300 million won. I just had to make sure the meeting happened and confirm the seat number. That's all. I didn't know they were going to. Yes, you did. Sung-jae set his glass down. You've been moving your wife's assets into her sister's name for 2 weeks. I saw the filings yesterday. Didn't understand them at the time. I do now. Because power doesn't just corrupt, it reveals the distance between what people say they value and what they'll actually protect when the cost becomes real. Park had made his choice the moment he started separating his wife from his consequences. The man near the door was looking at Park now, weapon still raised but his focus split. That was the opening. Camille moved. Not dramatically. Not even particularly fast by her standards. She closed the distance while the man's attention was divided, redirected the barrel with her left hand before he could correct his aim, and drove her right palm into his solar plexus hard enough that Sung-jae heard the air leave his lungs in a single sharp exhalation. The weapon clattered to the floor. The man dropped a second later. She kicked the gun towards Sung-jae without looking at it. We need to leave, she said. Right now. Sung-jae picked up the weapon. Safety still off. Suppressor still warm. He looked at Park, who'd pushed his chair back and was half standing, hands raised like he was surrendering to someone who wasn't asking. The 300 million, Sung-jae said. They are not going to pay it. Park's face crumpled. I know. And they're going to tell everyone you set this meeting up. That you confirmed the target. I know. So you understand what happens next. Park nodded slowly. He looked at the body, Choi Minute-ho, who'd been laughing about property values 90 seconds ago, and something in his expression settled into resignation. How long do I have? Sung-jae considered the question. Not from mercy. From practical assessment. Park had information. People who'd pressured him. Numbers they'd called from. The specific phrasing they'd used when they made their offer. All of that had value. Depends on how useful you want to be, Sung-jae said. He turned to Camille. How many? Outside? At least 3 in the stairwell. 2 in the parking structure. Maybe more depending on whether this was a cleanup operation or the primary move. She glanced at the man on the floor, still breathing, but not getting up anytime soon. He's not the lead. Wrong equipment, wrong positioning. Someone wanted him to fail. Sung-jae processed that. Sacrificial. Exactly. They send someone expendable to create noise and confusion, which means. The lights went out. Not flickering. Not gradual. Just immediate darkness that was too complete, too synchronized. Emergency lighting should have kicked in after 3 seconds. It didn't. Sung-jae's eyes hadn't adjusted yet when he felt Camille's hand on his shoulder. Firm. Deliberate. Not protective. Positioning. She was putting herself between him and the door before the threat had even materialized. Don't move, she whispered. He heard it then. Footsteps in the hallway. Multiple sets. Moving with the kind of coordinated precision that doesn't happen accidentally. No voices. No radio chatter. Just synchronized movement that suggested hours of training. Camille's breathing hadn't changed. Still slow. Still controlled. How many can you count? She asked quietly. Sung-jae listened. The footsteps had rhythm to them, not perfect unison, but staggered in a way that suggested tactical spacing. 3 steps between each set. Professional clearing formation. 6, he said. Maybe 8. 12, Camille corrected. You're hearing the front elements. There's a second team moving faster, lighter. They'll hit the secondary exits first. Sung-jae's mind was already working through the architecture. 3 exits from this level. Main stairs, service corridor, and the emergency shaft that technically wasn't supposed to be used except for fire. If they'd blocked all 3, if they'd cut the power, if they'd positioned teams to collapse inward. This wasn't the signal, Camille said. He heard the shift in her voice. Not fear. Recognition. What? Park's betrayal. The failed hit. All of it. That wasn't the actual move. She exhaled slowly. That was just to make sure you were exactly where they needed you. The footsteps stopped. Then the door opened. Not violently. Not rushed. Someone turned the handle and pushed it inward with the kind of calm certainty that comes from knowing the room's already secured. Light flooded in from the hallway, emergency lighting that apparently worked fine everywhere except inside. It silhouetted 3 figures in tactical gear. Professional stance. Weapons raised but not aggressive. Contained. The middle figure stepped forward. "Ko Sung-jae," he said. "We're not here for you." Sung-jae's eyes had adjusted enough now to make out details. Military-grade equipment. No insignia. Faces covered. But the way they held themselves, the spacing between them, the synchronized breathing, this wasn't private security. This was something that had been military once and had decided the structure was optional but the training wasn't. Then why am I in a room with no lights and 12 armed people? Sung-jae asked. The figure's head tilted slightly. Insurance. We were told there might be complications. Complications, Camille repeated. Her voice hadn't changed. Still calm. But Sung-jae could feel the tension in her hand where it rested on his shoulder. That's what you're calling me. The figure looked at her for the first time. Camille Ashford, he said. You're out of protocol. I was never in protocol. That's not what your file says. My file's incomplete. The figure paused. Behind him, Sung-jae saw more shapes moving in the hallway. Not entering. Just positioning. Creating a perimeter that could collapse inward or hold depending on how the next 30 seconds played out. We have authorization to retrieve you, the figure said. I'm not lost. You were never cleared for independent operation. I was never cleared for a lot of things. Camille shifted slightly. Sung-jae felt her weight redistribute, not away from him, but into a stance that could move in multiple directions. Doesn't mean they didn't happen. The figure's weapon lowered fractionally. We can do this cooperatively. Or we do it anyway. Sung-jae looked at the bodies around him. Park, frozen in his chair. Choi Minute-ho, still leaning back with laughter on his face. The man near the door, starting to regain consciousness. And Camille, standing perfectly still in a way that suggested the stillness was intentional. Strategic. She'd told him once that protection wasn't about strength. It was about positioning before danger arrived. He'd thought she meant physical positioning. Geography. Angles of approach. He'd been wrong. How many are actually here? He asked quietly. Camille didn't answer immediately. She was counting something he couldn't see yet. 50, she finally said. The figure in the doorway didn't confirm or deny. He just waited. And Camille, for the first time since Sung-jae had met her, smiled. Not from amusement. From recognition. You brought everyone, she said. We brought enough, the figure replied. For what? To be certain. The smile didn't fade. If anything, it deepened slightly, and that's when Sung-jae understood what he was seeing. Not confidence. Not fear. Something else. Something that looked like a person who'd been waiting for a specific moment and had just realized it had finally arrived. You think 50 is certain? She asked. The figure's stance shifted. Barely perceptible, but Sung-jae had spent years reading the microtells that separated people who were bluffing from people who actually held the cards. This was neither. This was reassessment. We have your pattern profiles, the figure said. Response matrices. Predictive models based on 4 years of operational data. 5 years, Camille corrected quietly. You missed the first year. Before I had a designation. We accounted for training variance. Did you account for what happens when someone outgrows their training? The question hung in the air. Sung-jae watched the figure's finger move fractionally on his weapon. Not pulling the trigger. Just acknowledging the possibility. Last chance, the figure said. Cooperative retrieval or forced compliance. Your choice. Camille's hand lifted from Sung-jae's shoulder. Get behind me, she said. Not to the figure. To Sung-jae. He didn't move immediately. He was calculating odds, processing variables, trying to understand how 50 armed people could be anything other than an overwhelming force. Trust me, she added. Softer this time. And that's when the math changed. Because trust isn't built in moments of safety. It's proven when it can cost you everything. Sung-jae had built his entire empire on understanding that principle, understanding that the people who stay when leaving makes more sense are the only ones worth keeping close. He stepped back. Camille moved forward. The lights came back on. And in the sudden brightness, Sung-jae saw what he'd missed in the dark. Camille wasn't afraid of 50 people. She was counting them to make sure they'd sent enough to make it interesting. The first figure moved left. Camille tracked him with her eyes, not her body. She'd learned that at 9, the difference between watching and telegraphing. Your opponent can't predict what your body hasn't committed to yet. Perimeter formation, she said quietly. Just to Sung-jae. Classic containment protocol. They'll collapse inward in waves. First team creates pressure, second team capitalizes on the reaction. How do you know? Because I wrote it. The admission landed between them. Sung-jae processed it while keeping his breathing steady. She'd told him she was trained. She hadn't told him she'd helped design the curriculum. The figures in tactical gear shifted positions. Synchronized. No verbal communication. They were using hand signals Sung-jae couldn't see from his angle, but Camille could. She was reading the room the way some people read sheet music, seeing the notes before they became sound. They'll move in 17 seconds, she said. Why 17? Human breath cycle. Most people exhale on movement. Creates microtells. They're counting to force synchronization. She tilted her head fractionally. 12 seconds now. Sung-jae watched her face. No tension. No anticipation. Just the same controlled calm she'd carried into every room he'd ever seen her enter. Like violence was weather, something that happened around you but didn't touch you unless you let it. 7 years ago, she'd been someone else entirely. The facility didn't have a name. Just a designation, Training Annex 7. Remote. Isolated. The kind of place that doesn't appear on maps because it never officially existed. Camille arrived in autumn when the trees were losing their leaves and the air smelled like rain that hadn't fallen yet. She was 12. They didn't ask her name. They gave her a number instead. 43. Not because there were 42 others. Because identity is just a placeholder for memory, and if you remove the placeholder, you remove the attachment. You're here because you demonstrated capacity, the instructor had told her that first morning. Woman in her 40s. Gray eyes. No expression. Capacity can be refined. Attachment cannot. The girl who would become Camille didn't ask what she had capacity for. She already knew. She'd survived 3 screening tests without being told they were tests. Had adapted to changing parameters without being given the parameters. That's what they selected for, not strength or speed or even intelligence. Adaptability. The ability to recognize patterns and adjust faster than the pattern could evolve. There were 11 others in her cohort. By the 2nd month, there were 8. By the 6th, there were 4. They didn't wash out. They just stopped appearing at morning assembly. The ones who left, Camille had asked once. Where did they go? The instructor's expression hadn't changed. That depends on what you mean by left. The lesson was clear. Survival wasn't about being the best. It was about being valuable enough that removing you cost more than keeping you. Present. 5 seconds, Camille said. The tactical team's breathing synchronized. Sung-jae could see it now, the subtle expansion of chest plates, the micro-adjustments of stance. They were preparing to move as a single unit. When they come, Camille continued, don't try to help. Just stay exactly where you are. Why? Because I need to know where you'll be. 3 seconds. She shifted her weight onto the balls of her feet. Not obviously. Just enough that when the moment came, she'd already be in motion while everyone else was still deciding to move. 2. Camille, Sung-jae said quietly. 1. I know. They moved. Past. The training was methodical. Not brutal. Brutality was inefficient. Just relentless. 16 hours a day, 7 days a week. Combat techniques. Surveillance protocols. Psychological manipulation. But the real education happened in the spaces between official instruction. They taught her how to read a room in 3 seconds. How to identify the most dangerous person not by their size or weapons, but by the way others positioned themselves in relation to them. How power reveals itself in proximity. Strength is obvious. One instructor had told her during year 2. That's why it's easy to counter. Real threat comes from people who understand the system well enough to make the system work for them. Camille absorbed everything. Not because she believed it. Because she recognized the pattern. They were teaching her to survive the organization by becoming essential to it. The strongest girl in her cohort was removed at 15. Too aggressive. Too confident. Confidence meant you thought you knew the limits. The organization didn't want people who knew limits. They wanted people who understood that limits were contextual. Camille wasn't the fastest. Wasn't the most skilled. But when they introduced variables mid-exercise, changing objectives without warning, removing resources, inserting conflicting instructions, she adapted while others hesitated. 43. The lead instructor had said during her final evaluation, "Why didn't you complete the extraction scenario as briefed?" "Because the briefing was wrong," she'd replied. "The target had already moved before we entered the building. Following the original plan would have wasted 4 minutes we didn't have." "How did you know the target moved?" "Thermal signatures in the secondary corridor. Fresh. Less than 90 seconds old." The instructor had paused. "Those weren't in the briefing parameters." "No," Camille had agreed. "But they were in the building." That was the moment they understood what they had. Not someone who followed protocol. Someone who used protocol as a starting point and evolved past it when the situation demanded. They gave her an operative designation 6 months later. No ceremony. Just a file number and deployment authorization. Present. The first wave hit. 3 figures converging from different angles. Textbook approach. Divide attention, create decision paralysis. Except Camille had helped write that textbook. She knew which angle would commit first, which would hesitate for 0.3 seconds to assess her counter. She used that 0.3. The first figure went down before his partner registered the movement. The second adjusted his approach mid-stride, good training, better instincts, but she'd already predicted the adjustment. By the time he corrected, she was inside his range where the rifle became a liability instead of an advantage. Sung-jae watched from exactly where she'd told him to stay. He'd seen her fight before. Busan. The warehouse. 3 attackers who'd thought numbers mattered more than precision. He remembered that night clearly now. Past, 3 years ago. The Busan docks smelled like salt and diesel. Sung-jae had come to finalize a shipping contract. Routine business. Boring, even. The kind of meeting that happened in offices, not warehouses. Except his contact had insisted. Better privacy, he'd said. No cameras, no records. Sung-jae should have recognized the setup. Would have, if he'd been thinking clearly. But he'd been distracted by expansion plans, by the pressure of managing 3 territories simultaneously, by the 1,000 small decisions that fragment attention. The first knife appeared from behind a shipping container. He'd turned, already calculating exits, already understanding he'd made a critical mistake. You don't survive in his world by being paranoid. You survive by being correct about when paranoid isn't paranoid enough. Then she'd stepped out from behind a forklift. Not rushing. Not dramatic. Just moving with the kind of certainty that suggested she'd been waiting for this specific moment. The 3 attackers saw her. Adjusted their approach. Went from rushing to coordinated assault. It didn't help. Sung-jae had watched her dismantle them with the kind of efficiency that only comes from thousands of repetitions. No wasted movement. No hesitation. She didn't fight like someone defending against an attack. She fought like someone ending a conversation that had lasted too long. When it was over, 17 seconds, he'd timed it later, she'd turned to face him. "You move like someone who expects backup," she'd said. He remembered his response. "I have backup." "They are 3 minutes away. You'd be dead in 40 seconds. "Then I'm lucky you were here." She'd studied him. Really looked. Not at his face or his clothes or the visible markers of wealth. At the way he stood. The micro-adjustments of his posture. Reading him the way he read balance sheets. "You weren't lucky," she'd said finally. "I've been watching you for 2 weeks." Present. The second wave came faster. Learning. Adapting. They'd seen her pattern now, seen how she moved. 6 figures this time, approaching from staggered intervals to prevent her from creating a rhythm. "They're adjusting," Sung-jae observed. "They should be," Camille replied. She dropped under a grab, redirected momentum, used the attacker's own force to create separation. "They trained me. They know what I can do." "Do they know what you've become?" She smiled. Brief. Almost invisible. "We're about to find out." Past. After Busan, Sung-jae had hired her immediately. Not because he trusted her. Trust was earned, not purchased. Because he understood value. And someone who could read him well enough to predict his movements 2 weeks in advance was either the perfect employee or the perfect threat. Better to keep her close enough to know which. The first month, she'd barely spoken. Just positioned herself in rooms before he entered, studied exit routes before he asked, identified threats he hadn't noticed. She moved through his world like she was cataloging it, learning the architecture of his life. Why me? He'd asked once. Late night in his office. She'd been standing near the window, watching the street below. You're predictable, she'd said. That's not a compliment. It's not an insult. She'd turned to face him. Most powerful people are chaos. They react to pressure, make emotional decisions, create patterns without realizing it. You're different. You're deliberate about your patterns. That makes you controllable. I'm not interested in being controlled. I know. That's why I chose you. He'd understood then. Not fully. That would take another year, but enough. She wasn't looking for employment. She was looking for something she could predict. Something stable in a life that had been designed to be unstable. Present. Get behind me. She said it again. Urgent this time. Different tone. Sung-jae moved without questioning. He'd learned to trust the shift in her voice, the way it changed when threat assessment moved from manageable to critical. The third wave didn't come from the door. They came through the walls. Breaching charges. Precisely placed. 3 walls simultaneously. The tactical team had been a distraction. The real assault had been setting up while Camille was focused on the visible threat. Classic misdirection. Except Camille wasn't surprised. You knew, Sung-jae said. I wrote this too, she replied. Chapter 7. Overwhelming force defeats individual skill. Unless the individual knows it's coming. The charges detonated. Smoke. Noise. Confusion. Exactly the kind of chaos designed to create decision paralysis. Camille had already moved. She wasn't fighting her way out. She was fighting her way to a specific position, a corner of the room where 3 sight lines intersected, where she'd have cover and visibility simultaneously. Sung-jae followed, not because he could help, because staying close to her was the only rational choice left. A figure emerged from the smoke, taller than the others, different equipment, command presence. 43, the figure said. Male voice. Calm. Almost paternal. You've exceeded your operational parameters. Camille stopped moving. Went completely still. Sung-jae felt the change immediately. Not fear. Recognition. Direct to Chen, she said quietly. It's time to come home. I was never home there. That's not what your conditioning indicates. Chen stepped closer. No weapon visible. Didn't need one. The dozen armed figures behind him were weapon enough. You were built for a purpose. You can't change architecture by changing location. Sung-jae watched her face. Saw something he'd never seen before. Not doubt. But the ghost of who she'd been before she became who she was. Sung-jae, she said without looking at him. Question. Yes. When I came to Busan. When I was watching you. Her breathing hadn't changed. Still controlled. Did you ever ask yourself why you? He had. Many times. I assumed you were gathering intelligence. Building leverage. Close. She shifted her weight fractionally. I was looking for someone predictable enough to protect but complex enough to be worth protecting. Worth protecting from what? From them. Chen's expression didn't change. You were never meant to leave. I didn't leave, Camille said. I chose. There's no distinction. There is to me. The smoke was clearing. Sung-jae could see the full tactical team now. Not 50. More. They'd brought everyone. This wasn't retrieval. This was overwhelming force designed to eliminate possibility. Chen gestured. The team tightened formation. You didn't find me, did you? Sung-jae asked quietly. Camille's lips curved. Not quite a smile. No. You chose me. Yes. Why? Because you're the kind of person who asks why instead of running. She finally looked at him. And because they taught me that the best way to hide is to become essential to something they can't easily destroy. Before Chen could respond, before the tactical team could move, before the moment could crystallize into action, the window shattered. Single shot. Precision. From outside. From above. The round hit the floor 3 inches from Chen's foot. Warning. Not threat. Information. Camille smiled. This time it reached her eyes. They early, she said. Sung-jae's mind raced. Who's early? Everyone else. Chen's expression finally changed. Not fear. Calculation. You called in support. I didn't have to. Camille's voice was quiet, almost gentle. You brought 50 people to retrieve one operative. That kind of resource allocation gets noticed. And there are organizations who've been waiting for you to be this exposed. Understanding hit Sung-jae like cold water. She hadn't just chosen him. She'd chosen this moment. Positioned herself exactly where she needed to be so that when they came for her, and she'd known they would, they'd commit so heavily that they'd create vulnerability elsewhere. You used me, he said. I protected you, she corrected. There's a difference. Chen was already moving. Tactical team repositioning. They'd gone from assault formation to defensive perimeter in under 3 seconds. Professional. Efficient. Not fast enough. Another shot. Closer this time. They are not here for me, Camille said. And they are not here for you. She looked at Chen. They are here because you brought everyone. And that means somewhere, right now, your other assets are completely exposed. Chen's jaw tightened. This isn't over. No, Camille agreed. But it's about to become someone else's problem. The tactical team was already retreating. Coordinated withdrawal. They'd reassess, regroup, come back with a different approach. But not today. The room emptied faster than it had filled. Sung-jae stood in the wreckage. Broken walls. Smoke. Bodies of the earlier casualties still on the floor. You planned this, he said. No. Camille was watching the window. I recognized the pattern. There's a difference. What pattern? They taught me that systems are only as strong as their redundancy. Remove enough pieces simultaneously, and the whole structure destabilizes. She finally turned to face him fully. I just had to make sure they removed the pieces themselves. Outside, in the distance, sirens. You didn't answer my question, Sung-jae said. Why me specifically? Camille was quiet for a moment. When she spoke, her voice carried something he hadn't heard before. Not vulnerability, but truth. Because you're the kind of person who stays still when everything around you is trying to break you. And I needed to learn how to do that. The sirens were getting closer. She moved toward the window, checking sight lines. Already planning the next move. They'll come back, Sung-jae said. I know. And next time they'll be desperate. I know that too. He studied her. Really looked. Saw not just the person who'd saved his life multiple times, but the architecture of decisions that had led her to this exact moment. When they do, he said carefully, we'll be ready. She looked at him, held his gaze. You chose me, Sung-jae replied. That means I'm choosing back. For the first time since he'd known her, Camille Ashford smiled like she meant it. The rain started 20 minutes after they left the building. Not gentle. Seoul rain doesn't negotiate. It comes down like it's trying to settle an argument, turning streets into mirrors and neon into bleeding color. Sung-jae's driver had the wipers on full, but visibility was still maybe 30 feet. Good for hiding. Bad for seeing what's hiding. Take the next left, Camille said from the back seat. The driver glanced at Sung-jae in the rear view. Sung-jae nodded. They turned onto a service road that ran behind a row of shuttered storefronts. Less traffic. Fewer cameras. The kind of route you take when you don't want a record of your movements. We're being followed, the driver said. Not panicked. Factual. 3 cars back, Camille confirmed. Black sedan. 2 occupants. They picked us up 4 blocks ago. Sung-jae turned slightly. Couldn't see anything through the rain-streaked rear window except headlights and distorted shapes. How can you tell it's them? They are maintaining exact distance. Most drivers adjust speed unconsciously. Traffic, lights, pedestrians. This car's using our brake lights as a reference point. That's trained behavior. The driver's hands tightened on the wheel. Should I? Keep going, Camille interrupted. They are not the problem. They are following us and they are not the problem. They are marking position. The actual team is already wherever we're going. Sung-jae processed that. You know where we're going. I know where they think we're going. Your safe house in Gangnam. The one you had renovated 6 months ago with the reinforced doors and private security. She was watching the side mirror, tracking something in the flow of traffic. You told 4 people about it. One of them talked. Which one? Does it matter right now? It didn't. Sung-jae pulled out his phone. 3 missed calls from his head of security. 2 messages from associates asking if he was all right after the incident in Itaewon. News traveled fast when it involved dead bodies and breaching charges. Don't answer those, Camille said. They'll worry. Good. Worried people make noise. Noise creates confusion. Confusion makes it harder to track actual movement. The driver made another turn. They were in Mapo now, industrial area, buildings that were warehouses during the day and empty concrete boxes at night. Rain hammered the roof. Outside, a single street light flickered like it couldn't decide whether staying on was worth the effort. Stop here, Camille said. Here. The driver looked around. Nothing but shuttered loading docks and chain-link fence. There's nothing. That's correct. Stop. Sung-jae nodded. The car pulled over. Engine idling. Rain creating white noise that made it hard to hear anything except water hitting metal. Camille opened her door. Stay in the car. Lock the doors. If anyone approaches who isn't me, drive. Where are you going? She was already out, moving through the rain like it was just another variable to account for. Sung-jae watched her cross the street, watched her disappear into the space between two warehouses. The driver shifted nervously. Boss, I don't like this. You're not supposed to like it. She just left us here. She's positioning. Sung-jae checked the mirrors. The black sedan had stopped 3 blocks back. Lights off. Waiting. She needs to confirm something. Confirm what? Before Sung-jae could answer, his phone lit up. Unknown number. He stared at it for 3 seconds, then answered. Ko Sung-jae. Not a question. A statement. Male voice. Calm. Almost friendly. Speaking. You have something that belongs to us. We'd like it back. Sung-jae's hand tightened on the phone. I don't know what you're talking about. Camille Ashford. Designation 43. Removed from active service 3 years ago without proper decommissioning protocol. She's been operating under your employment since then. She's a security consultant. She's an asset. And assets don't get to choose their deployment. The line went quiet except for breathing. Steady. Controlled. The kind of breathing that comes from people who've learned to manage their heart rate under stress. What do you want? Sung-jae asked. Cooperation. You return what's ours. We forget tonight happened. Everyone moves forward. And if I refuse? Then we stop asking politely. The call ended. Sung-jae looked up. Camille was back. Hair slicked against her skull from the rain. She opened the door and slid in without comment. They called you, she said. Not a question. How did you? Because that's step 3. Step 1 was following us. Step 2 was positioning the actual team. Step 3 is confirming you understand the situation. She pulled a knife from somewhere inside her jacket. Not threatening. Just checking the edge. Step 4 happens in approximately 90 seconds. What's step 4? They stopped talking. The driver made a sound. Half gasp, half laugh. There's no one here. We're in an empty. The first figure appeared in Sung-jae's peripheral vision. Then the second. Then 10 more. They materialized from spaces that had been empty 3 seconds ago. From behind dumpsters. From loading dock recesses. From the roofline of the building across the street. Not running. Not rushing. Just walking with the kind of synchronized precision that suggested they'd done this so many times it had become muscle memory. Count them, Camille said quietly. Sung-jae tried. Lost track at 23. They kept coming. Emerging from rain and darkness like they'd been part of the landscape all along and had just decided to become visible. 52. Camille supplied. They brought everyone. The driver's breathing had gone shallow. We need to leave. We need to. If you drive, you'll make it maybe 8 feet before they disable the car. They've already positioned spike strips at both exits. This street has exactly 2 ways out and they're controlling both. Camille's voice hadn't changed. Still calm. Still measured. We're not leaving in the car. Then how? We're not leaving at all. Sung-jae studied the formation. They were closing distance but not rushing. Maintaining spacing, roughly 6 feet between each person, staggered so that no 2 people could be targeted simultaneously. Professional spacing. Military discipline. They are moving slow, he observed. Because speed implies urgency. Urgency implies doubt. Camille opened her door again. They are not doubtful. They are certain. She stepped out into the rain. Sung-jae followed without thinking. The driver started to protest, then saw Sung-jae's expression and went quiet. Some moments, you either trust the person who's kept you alive or you don't. Middle ground doesn't exist. The rain was colder than Sung-jae expected. It hit his face like small accusations. Around them, the 52 figures continued their approach. Close enough now that he could make out details. Tactical gear. No insignia. Faces covered. Weapons held in ready positions that suggested extensive training. Amateur attacks are loud, Camille said. Not to Sung-jae. To the closing perimeter. Lots of noise. Lots of wasted energy. They rely on shock and speed because they don't trust their preparation. The figures didn't respond. Just kept walking. Professional attacks are different. Professionals remove your options before you realize you had options. They don't need shock because they've already controlled the environment. 20 feet away now. The problem with professional attacks, Camille continued, is they assume the target will react professionally. They build models, run simulations, create response matrices based on training data. 15 feet. But those models only work if the target is still following their training. 10 feet. One of the figures raised a hand. The entire formation stopped. Synchronized. Perfect execution. A single person stepped forward from the group. Different build. Older, if Sung-jae was reading the movement correctly. Authority in the stance. 43, the figure said. Female voice this time. You're surrounded. You're outnumbered. You have no extraction route and no support. I know, Camille replied. Then you understand this is over. I understand you think it's over. The figure's head tilted. We've trained for every scenario. Every possible response you could generate. We know your patterns. Your preferences. Your psychological profile. We built you. We know exactly what you'll do. Camille smiled. Not the sharp smile from earlier. Something softer. Almost sad. Then you know I'm about to ask a question. Silence. If you brought 52 people to retrieve one operative, Camille said, what does that tell you about your confidence in your models? The question hung in the rain. The figure didn't answer immediately. Behind her, the formation held position. Perfect discipline. But Sung-jae saw something shift. Not visible movement. Just the weight of doubt entering a system that had been built on certainty. We brought overwhelming force, the figure said, because we respect your capability. No. Camille took a step forward. You brought 52 people because you're not sure which version of me you're dealing with. The one you trained, or the one I've become since. The formation shifted. Barely perceptible, but Sung-jae caught it. They were recalculating. Last chance, the figure said. Come willingly or come unconscious. Your choice. They are not here for you, Camille said. Not to the figure. To Sung-jae. You understand that now. He did. The 52 people, the overwhelming force, the precise timing, none of it made sense if the objective was killing or kidnapping him. This was resource allocation at a scale that only made sense for high-value asset retrieval. Then why bring 50? He asked anyway. Playing his part. Because I'm not supposed to survive this. Camille's voice was quiet. Almost gentle. They are not here to bring me back. They are here to make sure I can't keep evolving. The figure stiffened. That's not, she started. Step 5, Camille interrupted, is termination disguised as retrieval. You bring overwhelming force, you make the offer, you wait for resistance, then you execute with full authorization. Asset deemed compromised. Threat eliminated. Everyone files the right paperwork and moves on. Sung-jae watched the formation. Saw the way weapons had shifted position. Not lowered. Elevated. Ready. They trained you, he said. Understanding crystallizing. They know exactly how you think. Camille didn't respond. Because the first wave hit. 3 figures broke formation. Perfect coordination. Different vectors. One high, one low, one center. Textbook assault pattern designed to divide attention and create decision paralysis. Camille moved. Not fast, efficient. She'd already mapped their approach before they'd committed to it. Already knew which angle would lead, which would follow, where the gaps in their coordination would appear. The first figure went down in less than 2 seconds. Clean. Precise. The second adjusted mid-approach. Good instinct, better training, but she'd anticipated the adjustment. Used it. Redirected his momentum into the third attacker. Both down. 7 seconds total. The formation adjusted immediately. That's when Sung-jae understood what Camille had been trying to tell him. They weren't slow because they were confident. They were slow because they were learning. Every movement she made, every technique she used, they were processing it. Updating their models in real time. They are adapting, he said. Faster than I expected, Camille admitted. The second wave came harder. 6 figures. Different pattern. They'd seen her counter the first approach and had already adjusted for it. No high-low center. This was simultaneous pressure from multiple angles designed to prevent her from creating separation. She dismantled them anyway. But it took longer. 12 seconds instead of 7. And when it was over, she was breathing slightly harder. The formation hadn't broken. Hadn't panicked. They'd just absorbed the data and repositioned. They know you, Sung-jae said. Camille wiped rain from her face. They built me. They know every technique I was taught. Every pattern I practiced. Every response I drilled into muscle memory. Then how do you win? I don't win. I evolve faster than they can adapt. The third wave moved differently. No coordination. No pattern. Completely randomized approach. Different speeds. Different vectors. No predictable spacing. Chaos's tactic. Camille's expression changed. Not fear. Recognition. Chapter 11, she said quietly. When pattern recognition becomes a weakness, remove the pattern. She didn't move the same way this time. Didn't use the techniques from the previous waves. She fought like someone who'd never been trained at all, improvising, using the environment, creating angles that didn't exist in any manual. The wave broke. But so did something else. Sung-jae saw it in the formation's response. They weren't just adapting. They were learning things about her that their training data didn't include. Things she'd developed after she left. Capabilities that existed outside their models. And that made her more dangerous. The figure who'd spoken earlier raised her hand. The formation froze. You're not 43 anymore, she said. Not an accusation. An assessment. Camille was breathing hard now. Not exhausted. But working. No. Then who are you? Someone you can't predict. The figure considered that. Rain running off her tactical gear. Behind her, 41 people waited for instruction. You think that matters? She asked finally. You think being unpredictable is enough? We have numbers. We have positioning. We have unlimited time. You have 41 people, Camille corrected. And every second you keep them here, you're not using them somewhere else. Resources have opportunity cost. You taught me that. The figure went still. What did you do? She asked quietly. Camille smiled. I learned from you. You said assets don't get to choose their deployment. But deployment is just resource allocation. And allocation assumes the resource is where you think it is. Understanding hit Sung-jae like electricity. You weren't just running, he said. You were positioning them. For 3 years, Camille confirmed. Every job I took. Every security consultation. Every time I made myself visible. I was teaching them I was predictable. That I operated in patterns. That they could model my behavior. But you can't model behavior, the figure said slowly, if the behavior is designed to teach you the wrong pattern. Correct. Where? The figure's voice had changed. Not angry. Cold. Where did you actually position yourself? Before Camille could answer, every light on the street went out. Not the rain stopping them. Not wind. Deliberate action. Total darkness. Sung-jae's hand went to his jacket. Not for a weapon. For his phone. Needed light. Needed to see. Don't. Camille's voice. Right beside him. They have night vision. Light makes you a target. Then what do we? Stay exactly where you are. Don't move. Don't speak. In the darkness, Sung-jae heard them. The 41 people. Not moving. Not speaking. Just breathing in that same controlled rhythm. Waiting for instruction. The figure's voice cut through the rain. You can't see them either. I don't need to see them, Camille replied. I know exactly where they are. I've been counting their breathing patterns for the last 4 minutes. Silence. Then, so quiet Sung-jae almost missed it, Camille whispered 2 words that changed everything. Now they start. And in the darkness, something else moved. Not Camille. Not the formation. Something that had been waiting for the lights to go out. The darkness had weight. Sung-jae felt it pressing against his eyes, against his skin. Rain was the only constant, hitting concrete, running down his neck, creating the kind of white noise that made it impossible to track individual sounds. He couldn't see Camille. Couldn't see the formation. Couldn't see anything except the afterimage of street lights burned into his retinas. Then someone screamed. Cut off. Immediate. Like a switch had been thrown. The formation moved. Sung-jae heard boots on wet pavement, the rustle of tactical gear, the sharp exhale of trained bodies shifting into combat stance. But they weren't moving toward him or Camille. They were repositioning. Defensive perimeter. Protecting against something they couldn't see. Hold position, the female figure commanded. Voice tight. Not panic. Control slipping. Night vision active. Acquire targets. I'm not seeing. Another scream. Different direction. Same abrupt ending. Sung-jae's heart was trying to climb out of his chest. Every instinct said run. Find cover. Get distance. But Camille had told him not to move, and the only thing more terrifying than standing still in the dark was not knowing what happened if he didn't. Something moved past him. Not close. Maybe 10 feet away. But he felt it. The displacement of air. The sense of mass moving through space. Fast. Purposeful. Silent except for the rain. They are in the perimeter, someone shouted. Multiple contacts. Multiple. Gunfire. Muzzle flash lit the street for half a second. Sung-jae saw shadows. Bodies. Movement that was too fast to track. Then darkness again. The gunfire stopped. Not because the shooter decided to stop. Because they couldn't anymore. Camille, Sung-jae said. Quiet. Trying not to broadcast his position. What's happening? Evolution, she replied. Right beside him. When had she moved? Your past teaches you how to survive. But growth? Growth teaches you how to win. She wasn't talking to him. She was talking to them. To the formation. To whoever was still listening in the dark. The lights came back on. Not all of them. Just one. Single spotlight. Portable. Military grade. It cut through the rain and illuminated the street in harsh white light. Sung-jae saw them. The formation, what was left of it, had collapsed inward. Defensive circle. Weapons out. 23 people standing. The rest were on the ground. Not dead. Just down. Disabled with the kind of precision that suggested whoever had hit them wasn't trying to kill. Just removed from play. And in the center of the street, standing in the spotlight like she'd been waiting for this exact moment, was Camille. She was breathing hard. Hair plastered to her skull. Blood on her knuckles that might have been hers or might not. But her stance was solid. Balanced. Ready. Around the defensive circle, Sung-jae saw them now. The others. The ones who'd moved through the darkness. 7 people. Different builds, different gear, but the same controlled presence. They weren't part of the original formation. They'd been waiting. You called in support, the female figure said. Not quite a question. I called in witnesses, Camille corrected. There's a difference. One of the 7, male, older, moving with the kind of confidence that comes from decades of not being wrong, stepped into the light. Camille Ashford, he said. It's been a long time. Camille went completely still. Not the controlled stillness from before. This was different. Frozen. Like her body had forgotten how to move because her brain was too busy processing. Director Park, she said finally. Voice flat. Empty. You remember? Park smiled. Warm. Almost paternal. I was concerned you might have forgotten us. I remember everything. I know you do. That's why we're here. Park walked closer. Hands visible. Non-threatening. The formation tracked him but didn't fire. They were waiting for instruction. You've done well. 3 years in the field. No support. No resources. And you've not only survived, you've evolved beyond initial parameters. Camille didn't respond. That's what we designed you for, Park continued. Not survival. Evolution. We built you to adapt. To grow. To become more than what we taught you. Sung-jae was watching Camille's face. Saw something he'd never seen before. Not fear. But the ghost of who she'd been before she learned to be someone else. You left 3 years ago, Park said. We let you leave. Did you ever wonder why? You didn't let me leave. I escaped. No. Park's expression didn't change. You were released. Into the wild. Into an environment with real stakes and real consequences. Because controlled training has limits. You can only evolve so far in a laboratory. The rain was softer now. Not stopping. Just losing conviction. You're lying, Camille said. Am I? Think about it. How did you get out? How did you access secure terminals? How did you know which routes weren't monitored? We've been running this organization for 40 years. You think a 12-year-old training designation could genuinely outthink our security? Silence. We gave you the keys, Park continued. We gave you the gaps. We created the possibility and waited to see if you'd take it. Sung-jae saw it hit her. The realization. Not slowly. All at once. Like a building collapsing. You wanted me to leave, she said quietly. We needed you to leave. Needed you to think it was your choice. Your decision. Because real evolution doesn't happen inside safe boundaries. It happens when you're forced to adapt or die. Park took another step closer. And you've adapted beautifully. The 7 people around the perimeter shifted. Not aggressive. Anticipatory. Everything you've learned, Park said. Every skill you've developed outside our training. Every way you've grown beyond what we taught you. That's what we wanted. That's what we built you for. You built me to be a weapon. No. Park's voice was gentle. Certain. We built you to be a system. Weapons break. Weapons have limits. But systems? Systems evolve. Systems improve themselves. You're not a tool, Camille. You're a process. Camille's hands had curled into fists. I'm a person. You're both. That's what makes you valuable. Sung-jae wanted to move. Wanted to do something. But he was smart enough to know he was watching something he couldn't interrupt. This was between Camille and the man who'd shaped her. You're not free, Park continued. You're unfinished. You left before we could complete your development. We need you to come back. Let us finish what we started. I'm already finished. Are you? Then why do you still move like we trained you? Why do you still think in our frameworks? Why do you still use our methodologies? Park's expression was almost sympathetic. You can change location. You can change context. But you can't change architecture. We're in your foundation, Camille. We always will be. The darkness had weight. Sung-jae felt it pressing against his eyes, against his skin. Rain was the only constant, hitting concrete, running down his neck, creating the kind of white noise that made it impossible to track individual sounds. He couldn't see Camille. Couldn't see the formation. Couldn't see anything except the afterimage of street lights burned into his retinas. Then someone screamed. Cut off. Immediate. Like a switch had been thrown. The formation moved. Sung-jae heard boots on wet pavement, the rustle of tactical gear, the sharp exhale of trained bodies shifting into combat stance. But they weren't moving toward him or Camille. They were repositioning. Defensive perimeter. Protecting against something they couldn't see. Hold position, the female figure commanded. Voice tight. Not panic. Control slipping. Night vision active. Acquire targets. I'm not seeing. Another scream. Different direction. Same abrupt ending. Sung-jae's heart was trying to climb out of his chest. Every instinct said run. Find cover. Get distance. But Camille had told him not to move, and the only thing more terrifying than standing still in the dark was not knowing what happened if he didn't. Something moved past him. Not close. Maybe 10 feet away. But he felt it. The displacement of air. The sense of mass moving through space. Fast. Purposeful. Silent except for the rain. They're in the perimeter, someone shouted. Multiple contacts. Multiple. Gunfire. Muzzle flash lit the street for half a second. Sung-jae saw shadows. Bodies. Movement that was too fast to track. Then darkness again. The gunfire stopped. Not because the shooter decided to stop. Because they couldn't anymore. Camille, Sung-jae said. Quiet. Trying not to broadcast his position. What's happening? Evolution, she replied. Right beside him. When had she moved? Your past teaches you how to survive. But growth? Growth teaches you how to win. She wasn't talking to him. She was talking to them. To the formation. To whoever was still listening in the dark. The lights came back on. Not all of them. Just one. Single spotlight. Portable. Military grade. It cut through the rain and illuminated the street in harsh white light. Sung-jae saw them. The formation, what was left of it, had collapsed inward. Defensive circle. Weapons out. 23 people standing. The rest were on the ground. Not dead. Just down. Disabled with the kind of precision that suggested whoever had hit them wasn't trying to kill. Just removed from play. And in the center of the street, standing in the spotlight like she'd been waiting for this exact moment, was Camille. She was breathing hard. Hair plastered to her skull. Blood on her knuckles that might have been hers or might not. But her stance was solid. Balanced. Ready. Around the defensive circle, Sung-jae saw them now. The others. The ones who'd moved through the darkness. 7 people. Different builds, different gear, but the same controlled presence. They weren't part of the original formation. They'd been waiting. You called in support, the female figure said. Not quite a question. I called in witnesses, Camille corrected. There's a difference. One of the 7, male, older, moving with the kind of confidence that comes from decades of not being wrong, stepped into the light. Camille Ashford, he said. It's been a long time. Camille went completely still. Not the controlled stillness from before. This was different. Frozen. Like her body had forgotten how to move because her brain was too busy processing. Director Park, she said finally. Voice flat. Empty. You remember? Park smiled. Warm. Almost paternal. I was concerned you might have forgotten us. I remember everything. I know you do. That's why we're here. Park walked closer. Hands visible. Non-threatening. The formation tracked him but didn't fire. They were waiting for instruction. You've done well. 3 years in the field. No support. No resources. And you've not only survived, you've evolved beyond initial parameters. Camille didn't respond. That's what we designed you for, Park continued. Not survival. Evolution. We built you to adapt. To grow. To become more than what we taught you. Sung-jae was watching Camille's face. Saw something he'd never seen before. Not fear. But the ghost of who she'd been before she learned to be someone else. You left 3 years ago, Park said. We let you leave. Did you ever wonder why? You didn't let me leave. I escaped. No. Park's expression didn't change. You were released. Into the wild. Into an environment with real stakes and real consequences. Because controlled training has limits. You can only evolve so far in a laboratory. The rain was softer now. Not stopping. Just losing conviction. You're lying, Camille said. Am I? Think about it. How did you get out? How did you access secure terminals? How did you know which routes weren't monitored? We've been running this organization for 40 years. You think a 12-year-old training designation could genuinely outthink our security? Silence. We gave you the keys, Park continued. We gave you the gaps. We created the possibility and waited to see if you'd take it. Sung-jae saw it hit her. The realization. Not slowly. All at once. Like a building collapsing. You wanted me to leave, she said quietly. We needed you to leave. Needed you to think it was your choice. Your decision. Because real evolution doesn't happen inside safe boundaries. It happens when you're forced to adapt or die. Park took another step closer. And you've adapted beautifully. The 7 people around the perimeter shifted. Not aggressive. Anticipatory. Everything you've learned, Park said. Every skill you've developed outside our training. Every way you've grown beyond what we taught you. That's what we wanted. That's what we built you for. You built me to be a weapon. No. Park's voice was gentle. Certain. We built you to be a system. Weapons break. Weapons have limits. But systems? Systems evolve. Systems improve themselves. You're not a tool, Camille. You're a process. Camille's hands had curled into fists. I'm a person. You're both. That's what makes you valuable. Sung-jae wanted to move. Wanted to do something. But he was smart enough to know he was watching something he couldn't interrupt. This was between Camille and the man who'd shaped her. You're not free, Park continued. You're unfinished. You left before we could complete your development. We need you to come back. Let us finish what we started. I'm already finished. Are you? Then why do you still move like we trained you? Why do you still think in our frameworks? Why do you still use our methodologies? Park's expression was almost sympathetic. You can change location. You can change context. But you can't change architecture. We're in your foundation, Camille. We always will be. Not because she moved first. Because she'd predicted he would move and had already started before his decision became action. The weapon never cleared his holster. Park went down. Not hard. Just precisely. Controlled. The way you drop someone when you want them unconscious. Not dead. The 7 people moved simultaneously. So did the formation. So did Sung-jae. Not to fight, but to get clear. Give Camille space. Trust that she knew what she was doing. And Camille? She moved through them like water. Not fighting. Flowing. Every block became a counter. Every strike became positioning for the next movement. She wasn't using techniques anymore. She was using understanding. Reading the space. Predicting intention. Moving before her opponents committed. Sung-jae had seen her fight before. But this was different. This wasn't combat. This was demonstration. She was showing them, showing everyone, that she'd evolved past pattern recognition into something that looked like precognition. 3 of the 7 went down in the first 15 seconds. The formation broke. Not from fear. From professional assessment. They'd been sent to retrieve an asset. What they were facing now was something else entirely. Stand down. The female figure who'd led them. Voice sharp. Retrieval mission aborted. Fall back to secondary positions. They moved. Disciplined. Professional. Not running. Withdrawing with the kind of coordination that suggested they'd trained for this specific contingency. In 90 seconds, the street was empty. Just Sung-jae, Camille, and Park still unconscious on the ground. Camille was breathing hard. Real exertion now. She'd burned through reserves she normally kept protected. Is it true? Sung-jae asked. About the other facilities. Some of it. Camille looked down at Park. Enough to make them worry. Not enough to destroy everything. That was never the goal. What was the goal? To make them understand they don't control me anymore. She looked at Sung-jae. And to make sure they understand that trying to reclaim me will cost more than I'm worth. Sung-jae studied her. Really looked. Saw not just the person who'd saved him multiple times, but the architecture of decisions that had led to this specific moment in this specific street. You used me, he said. Not accusing. Observing. I protected you, she corrected. Everything I did positioned you outside their operational interest. You were never the target. You were the environment that let me evolve into someone they couldn't predict. And now? Now they know. They know I've changed. They know trying to reclaim me creates risk. They know I'm more valuable as a cautionary tale than as a recovered asset. She turned away from Park. They'll leave us alone. Not from kindness. From cost-benefit analysis. In the distance, sirens. Real ones this time. Someone had reported the gunfire. We need to leave, Camille said. Where? Somewhere they are not looking. Somewhere predictable enough to be safe but flexible enough to adapt if parameters change. Sung-jae smiled despite everything. That's not very specific. It's not supposed to be. Specific plans assume static environments. Environments are never static. They started walking. Left Park on the ground. Left the street. Left the moment. Behind them, the spotlight finally died. And in the darkness, Park's eyes opened. He lay still for 3 seconds. Then reached for his comm device. All units, he said quietly. Mission parameters changed. 43 is no longer retrieval priority. Pause. She's now in observation class. Monitor only. Do not engage. Another pause. And update her file. She's not unfinished. He sat up slowly. Watched the empty street. She's exactly what we built her to be. The safe house wasn't in Gangnam. It was in Bukhansan, north of the city, built into a hillside where Seoul's light pollution couldn't quite reach. Old construction. Reinforced during the Cold War when people still believed concrete could protect you from what was coming. Sung-jae had bought it 4 years ago and told exactly one person about it. That person was driving the car. How long have you known about this place? Camille asked. She was in the passenger seat, watching the road behind them through the side mirror. Does it matter? It matters if I'm supposed to believe you've been predictable for 3 years. Sung-jae smiled despite the exhaustion pulling at his edges. I've been predictable about 90% of my life. The other 10% is why I'm still alive. They turned onto a narrow access road. No street lights. Just trees and darkness and the sense of elevation. The city was behind them now, below them, glowing like something that hadn't learned to stop yet. The house came into view. Single story. Flat roof. Windows that had been replaced with something that looked like glass but wasn't. Sung-jae parked in a carport that had been designed to hide the vehicle from aerial surveillance. Nice, Camille observed. Paranoia is expensive. Paranoia is preparation with better marketing. They went inside. Sung-jae flipped the lights. Nothing happened. He tried again. Same result. Camille's hand moved to where her weapon would be if she still had it. She'd lost it somewhere in the street. Or maybe she'd dropped it deliberately. Hard to tell with her. Circuit breaker, she asked. Should be automatic. Generator kicks in if main power fails. Should be. They stood in the darkness. Listening. The house was quiet in the way empty places are quiet, not peaceful, just absent, like the space was waiting to be filled with something it couldn't predict yet.
We're not alone, Camille said. I know.
You want to leave?
Sung-jae considered it. They could walk back to the car. Drive somewhere else.
Keep moving until movement stopped being strategy and started being just fear with a root.
No, he said finally.
I'm tired of running.
You haven't been running. I have.
Then I'm tired of watching you run. Camille turned to look at him. He couldn't see her face in the darkness, but he felt the weight of her attention.
They're inside, she said.
Probably 3, maybe 4, waiting for us to make the first move. Or they are waiting for you to make the move you've always made. Which is?
Assume you're outnumbered. Assess the threat.
Control the environment before engaging.
Sung-jae took a step forward. Into the house. Into the darkness.
What if you don't do that this time? Then I'm fighting blind. Or you're trusting that you've already done the work. That you don't need to assess anymore because you've spent 3 years preparing for exactly this moment.
He heard her exhale. Slow. Controlled.
The breathing pattern she used when she was recalculating.
You're learning, she said.
I've been paying attention.
They moved deeper into the house. Sung-jae knew the layout by memory. Front room opened into a kitchen. Kitchen connected to a hallway.
3 doors off the hallway, bedroom, bathroom, storage.
Windows in the front room and bedroom. 1 exit in the back through the kitchen. Standard defensive architecture. Which meant standard attack patterns.
They'll be in the bedroom, Camille whispered. Best sight lines. Controllable choke point. You think they think you'll go there first. It's what I would do. Then don't.
Sung-jae turned left instead of right. Went toward the kitchen. Camille followed. She wasn't arguing. Just adapting.
That's what made her dangerous. Not that she had a plan, but that she could recognize when someone else's plan was better.
The kitchen was darker than the front room. No windows.
Just the shape of cabinets and counters against the wall. Sung-jae reached out, touched the edge of the sink, oriented himself. Behind them, a floorboard creaked.
Not loud. Just enough. Someone shifting weight.
Someone who'd been standing still long enough that movement created sound. They are learning to, Camille said.
Quiet. Almost impressed. They knew I'd expect the bedroom.
They positioned in the front room instead. How many?
2.
Maybe 3. 1 behind the couch. At least 1 more near the window. How do you know? Air displacement. When people breathe in confined spaces, it changes the acoustics. There's someone breathing near the window who's trying very hard not to breathe near the window.
Sung-jae processed that.
What do? We stop playing their game.
She moved. Not toward the front room. Toward the back door. Fast. Confident.
Like she'd been planning this route the entire time.
Sung-jae followed.
Heard the response immediately. Bodies moving in the front room, repositioning, trying to cut off the exit. They'd been waiting for forward aggression.
Retreat wasn't in their model. Camille hit the back door. It was locked. Deadbolt. Key only from the inside. She didn't slow down. She drove her shoulder into it. Once. Twice. The frame splintered. Old wood. Good for keeping out animals and weather. Not good for stopping someone who understood leverage points. They were outside. Cold air. Trees. The sound of Seoul in the distance like a promise that civilization still existed somewhere. They'll follow, Sung-jae said. I know.
So why? Because inside, they control the space. Out here, the space is too big to control.
They moved into the trees. Not running. Just walking with purpose. Sung-jae's eyes were adjusting. He could make out shapes now. Trunks. Branches. The outline of terrain sloping upward. Behind them, the back door opened. Fully. Someone had unlocked it from the inside. 3 figures emerged. Tactical gear. Night vision. Moving with coordinated precision.
They are equipped, Sung-jae said. They are overconfident, Camille corrected. Night vision creates tunnel vision.
You see what's lit up. You miss what's not. She dropped to a crouch. Picked up a rock. Not a big one. Just large enough to have weight.
She threw it hard, 30 degrees left of their actual position.
It hit a tree. Solid thunk.
All 3 figures turned toward the sound.
Camille moved right. Silent. Using the distraction to create distance. Sung-jae followed. He was learning to trust her rhythm.
learning to move when she moved, stay still when she stilled.
They circled back, not away from the house, toward it,
using the terrain to come at the three figures from behind.
This is insane, Sung-jae whispered.
This is understanding the system, Camille replied. They think we're running,
so we attack. The first figure never saw her coming.
She hit him from behind.
Not with force, with precision.
Knew exactly where to strike to make a body stop functioning without permanent damage.
He went down quiet. His weapon clattered against a root. The second figure turned. Fast. Well-trained. Weapon coming up.
Camille was already inside his range. Her hand caught his wrist, redirected the barrel toward the ground, drove her knee into his solar plexus.
He dropped. The third figure fired. Muzzle flash lit the forest. The round went wide.
He'd been aiming for where she'd been, not where she was.
Sung-jae saw her close the distance. Saw the third figure try to adjust. Saw him realize he didn't have time to adjust. It was over in 4 seconds. Camille stood in the aftermath, breathing hard. Not from exertion.
From something else. Sung-jae had seen this before, the way combat left residue. The way violence changed air pressure.
That's everyone, she said.
They sent a retrieval team, not an assault force. How do you know?
Because they didn't kill the power. They just disabled it.
That's containment thinking. They still believe they can bring me back.
She walked back toward the house. Sung-jae followed.
Inside, the lights still didn't work.
But they didn't need them anymore.
The darkness felt different now. Less oppressive.
More like just the absence of light.
Camille found a flashlight in the kitchen. Military grade.
One of the tactical team had dropped it.
She clicked it on, played the beam across the walls. Generator should be in the storage room, Sung-jae said.
They found it.
Sung-jae flipped the switch. The house hummed to life.
Lights flickered on. Appliances beeped. The refrigerator started running.
Normalcy reasserting itself.
Except the woman standing in the front room wasn't normal. She was older.
50, maybe.
Gray hair pulled back. Civilian clothes. No weapon visible.
Just standing there like she'd been waiting patiently for them to finish their business outside.
Camille froze.
Director Yoon, she said. Camille.
Yoon's voice was measured. Calm.
You've been busy. I've been surviving. You've been dismantling.
Yoon gestured to the couch. May I sit? It's been a long night.
Camille didn't answer. Didn't move. Just watched Yoon with the kind of focus that suggested she was mapping every possible outcome before committing to any of them.
Yoon sat anyway. Crossed her legs. Relaxed posture.
Like this was a business meeting, not a confrontation in a house where 3 unconscious operatives were lying in the woods outside.
Park contacted me, Yoon said. Told me what happened. Told me what you did. And
I'm here to ask you a question. Which is? Was it worth it? Camille's expression didn't change.
I don't understand. 3 years. Resources spent positioning yourself. Assets burned.
Relationships leveraged. All to prove a point.
Yoon leaned forward slightly.
Was the point worth the cost?
I'm still alive. That's not what I asked. Sung-jae was watching the exchange. Watching the way Yoon spoke. No threats. No manipulation. Just questions. That made her more dangerous than Park.
Because questions created doubt in ways statements couldn't. You want to know if I have regrets, Camille said. I want to know if you understand what you gave up.
You could have been extraordinary.
Could have shaped the next generation. Instead, you're standing in a safe house with a man who's useful but ultimately limited.
Yoon's eyes flicked to Sung-jae.
No offense. None taken, Sung-jae replied.
He meant it.
You reduced yourself, Yoon continued.
Made yourself smaller.
That's not freedom. That's just a different cage. I chose the cage. Choice is an illusion. You're still operating in frameworks we built.
Still thinking in patterns we taught you. You didn't escape the system.
You just convinced yourself you did. Camille was quiet for a long moment. Then she smiled.
You're right, she said. Yoon blinked. You're right. I'm still using your frameworks. Still thinking in your patterns. I can't escape my foundation. Park was right about that too. She took a step forward. But here's what you didn't account for.
Foundations aren't prisons.
They are starting points. You taught me to adapt.
To evolve.
To become more than what I was. Another step.
You just assumed I'd evolve in directions you could predict. And you didn't.
No.
I evolved in the only direction that mattered. I learned to choose.
Not just react. Not just survive. Choose. Yoon's expression shifted.
Choice is programming. Maybe. But I chose my programming this time. The house was very quiet. You're not here to retrieve me, Camille said.
Are you? No.
You're here to assess whether I'm a threat. Yes.
And? Yoon stood slowly. You're not a threat.
You're a variable. And variables are only dangerous when they are unpredictable.
She moved toward the door. Stopped. Looked back.
But you're not unpredictable anymore, Camille.
We understand you now. We know what you'll choose. Where you'll go.
How you'll respond to pressure.
She smiled. Thin. Professional. You think you won.
You think proving you can choose means you're free.
Pause. But we already know what you'll choose.
Which means you're exactly as controlled as you were before. Just more expensive to maintain.
She left. Sung-jae listened to her footsteps. Listened to the front door open and close.
Listened to a car start in the distance and drive away. She's wrong, he said finally. Is she? You're not predictable.
I chose you. I chose to protect you.
I chose to stay. Camille turned to face him.
Those are patterns.
Patterns can be modeled. Patterns built on choice are different than patterns built on programming.
How? Because programming is static.
Choice adapts.
Sung-jae moved closer. They can model what you've chosen. But they can't model what you'll choose next.
That's the part they don't control.
Camille studied him.
Really looked.
Not reading. Just seeing.
You stayed, Sung-jae said quietly.
No. She shook her head.
I decided.
The distinction mattered.
Staying implied lack of options.
Deciding implied evaluation of options and conscious selection. One was passive. One was active.
What now?
Sung-jae asked. Now we rebuild. They know where we are. Who we are. How we think. So we become something they don't expect.
Which is? Permanent.
Camille's expression shifted. Not softer. Just clearer.
They built me to evolve.
To adapt. To become more. They assumed that meant more dangerous. More capable. More valuable.
But it doesn't.
No. It means more human. More connected.
More willing to build something instead of just surviving.
She looked around the house.
At the walls.
At the space. At the possibility. We stay here, she said.
We build something they can't predict because it's not tactical.
We build a life. Sung-jae smiled.
That's the least professional plan I've ever heard from you.
Good.
Professional is what they expect. They spent the next hour checking perimeters.
Securing windows.
Making sure the 3 operatives outside were still unconscious and would wake up somewhere that wasn't their problem. When it was done, when the house was as secure as they could make it, they sat in the front room.
Lights on. No hiding. No planning. Just existing in the moment.
Do you think they'll come back?
Sung-jae asked.
Eventually.
But not soon.
They'll watch. They'll wait. They'll try to understand what we're building.
And when they do come back, we'll deal with it.
Together.
That was new.
Together.
Not her protecting him. Not her managing the threat alone. Partnership. Outside, dawn was starting to break. Light creeping over the mountains. Seoul waking up.
And somewhere, in a surveillance room 300 kilometers away, someone watched footage replay on a screen.
The street.
The rain. The 52 operatives.
The darkness. The fight. They watched Camille move. Watched her adapt. Watched her evolve in real time. A figure entered the frame. Male. Older. Authority in his posture. Assessment, he asked. The person at the screen didn't turn around. Just kept watching. She's exceeded all parameters.
She's no longer retrievable through conventional means. Recommendations.
Pause. The footage replayed. Camille dismantling the tactical team. Camille predicting movements before they happened. Camille becoming something the system hadn't accounted for. Send the next one, the person at the screen said. Define parameters. Someone she can't read. Someone outside her training matrix.
Someone who understands her because they were built the same way.
The figure considered this.
You want to send another designation. Not just any designation.
The person at the screen finally turned. Female.
Young. Maybe 25. Sen 17.
She was in the same cohort.
She knows how 43 thinks. 17 was decommissioned.
17 was supposed to be decommissioned.
There's a difference.
The figure was quiet for a moment, processing implications.
And if 17 can't bring her back, then we confirm what we already suspect.
That 43 isn't an asset anymore. She's a template.
And templates are too valuable to destroy. She turned back to the screen.
The footage had looped. Camille was fighting again. Evolving again.
Winning again. Let her build her life, the woman said.
Let her think she's won.
Let her believe choice means freedom.
Pause.
And when she's comfortable, when she's established, when she thinks she's safe. The footage froze.
Camille's face. Mid-movement. Expression focused. Certain.
That's when we show her what she actually chose.
The screen went dark.
And somewhere in Buchanan, in a house built into a hillside, Camille Ashford felt something she hadn't felt in 3 years.
Not fear. Not uncertainty. Just the quiet understanding that evolution never stops.
That becoming something new means accepting you'll never be finished.
That choosing yourself is the beginning, not the end. She looked at Sung-jae. He was watching the sunrise. Peaceful. Content.
She didn't tell him what she felt. Didn't tell him that the fight wasn't over. Didn't tell him that choosing to build a life just painted a target on everything she'd built.
She just watched the sunrise with him. And prepared for what came next.
Because the most dangerous person in any system isn't the one who escapes. It's the one who understands the system completely and chooses to stay anyway.
You can't escape what built you, but maybe you can decide what you build with it. That's the difference between running and choosing.